Hey everybody, Edo here, and I am super excited today because I have Brian Henk, president of Overworld Games, on the line. Say hello, Brian.
Hi.
So I've actually known you for a really... actually, before I go any further, this is also going to be put out on the Board Game Business Podcast, which is your podcast, at some point around
Yep.
the time or before or after. We'll figure that out later. But so you and I have known each other for quite a long time. We both worked through Impressions, and Good Cop, Bad Cop was probably around the time of Liftoff. I think you might have been a little bit ahead of me on Kickstarter. But you've and Overworld Games have had a really interesting trajectory of games and approaches that with lots of probably successes and lessons in there. So I just want to walk through it and what you're currently doing and all that stuff. But as a kickoff point, your first campaign, and correct me if I'm wrong, your first campaign was Good Cop, Bad Cop, Social Deduction, and really very successful. I don't recall, was that just success? I mean, I know it was successful after, but was the Kickstarter a really big Kickstarter and at retail, or did it pick up at retail? What was the story there?
Yeah, picked up at retail. Our campaign, I think it was like 350 people. And it was, I don't even know how much we made. Not much. I think it was like maybe 6,000. It's been so long.
That's a pretty
but
small
yeah,
campaign, right?
Small campaign. I mean, it was fairly early on too, but even at that point, Clayton and I, my design partner, kind of business partner, were wondering, like, are we too late for Kickstarter? Is this just going to be something that kind of goes, and then it's over, in a year, nobody even goes on and nobody talks about it. We were like, whoa, there's some successful game campaigns. Let's give it a try. And so we did it. But it turns out we weren't too late. We were actually early now when you look at it.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the things when you have one of these exploding markets. But so that was really, and just in that early stages, working with Impressions, did you, was it a hard conversation with Aldo? Because we talk about him a lot, and nowadays it's a little bit harder. Or was that a time when he was picking up lots of candidates? Because it wouldn't have been a huge campaign you showed to him.
That's true. When I joined Impressions, I believe that was actually after our New Salem campaign as well. So we had a couple games. I think we had like an expansion to Good Cop, Bad Cop possibly by that time. I don't think we joined with him right away. But we didn't have a huge history of games either. But there weren't as many games out there. There weren't as many publishers who wanted to join Impressions.
Right.
So
so the retail success, was that before or after?
Yeah.
Were you already in retail before you started working with Impressions, or did he and Impressions bring Good Cop, Bad Cop to retail?
I guess he did bring it to retail. Yeah, it's been so long. I can't remember exactly when each thing happened, but he mainly brought it to retail. Yeah, because we didn't really have any consolidation. We sold on Amazon, so that worked pretty well for people who wanted to get a copy. But yeah, he must have been with us.
And so in terms of, and we'll certainly get out of the distant past soon,
Yeah.
but just in terms of what you thought brought that to, what was the thing you felt made that the retail hit that it turned out to be, considering that, it didn't fly off the Kickstarter shelf, so to speak?
True. It's a very simple game, very easy to get into, very easy to learn. But then it kind of evolves, and there's a lot of, you can still strategize with the people around you, but it's just so easy to get into. It's the game I would bring to someone who's never played anything beyond like Sorry or Monopoly. Like, you can play Good Cop, Bad Cop. It's that easy. But still, like, it, more experienced gamers like it. So it's just like, it appeals to a lot of people, and it's just so quick, so easy to get to the table. And then Tom Vassell loved it. And that was probably the kind of what ignited it. He talked about it so much, just loved it, about how much he loved it. And then, if he says that he loves a game, people are going to check it out. And so then, they bought from us on Amazon, and then we had some sales history, and we went to Aldo, and he was like, yeah, I've heard about this game. Like, let's do it. So that's kind of how we joined. But so yeah, I'll give. I mean, I think it's a really good game, easy to get into. But then also, like, a lot of the success, I think, goes to Tom Vassell for giving us kind of that. He was our Kickstarter, since Kickstarter wasn't.
Interesting. And I do know that generally the Dice Tower effect has the dice tower effect has diminished a little bit, and just in terms of how much traffic instantly comes from that, as there's been so much other content providers. But it still certainly makes a huge difference when one of those guys or any big media personality digs your game. So you've had the success with Good Cop, Bad Cop. You end up doing a number of sequels for it, and those were successful. And then you start doing a couple different things. So first, you're and I remember talking to you at the time. You were like, we're the social deduction company, and that was a really big part of what you're doing. And you do these other bigger box sort of social deduction plus games, right? You have New Salem that comes up. You have Booze Barons and Exposed as well. And I know Booze Barons wasn't designed by you, right? That was
Jeremy Commander.
Jeremy. Were the other two so were you also expanding out with designers? So take us through the sort of evolution of deduction phase.
Yeah. What would the evolution of deduction? We've kind of gone. So Exposed, I guess, was our first game that wasn't straight social deduction. There was still a pretty heavy deduction element, but we moved away.
That's true.
Yeah, moved away from the social part, I guess, with that one. But Booze Barons was Leaders of Euphoria, which is based on Good Cop, Bad Cop, also social.
Yeah, hold on. We'll get to Leaders of Euphoria.
Oh, okay.
I'm putting that in your face. All right. Sure, and just to clarify for the nuance that the deduction company is making right now is that in terms of Good Cop, Bad Cop, New Salem, you're playing as a hidden identity and in a party, in a group, cops versus bad guys, or good guys versus bad guys, or witches or whatever, townsfolk. Whereas in Exposed, you're trying to figure out stuff on the board, but it's much more of a deduction game than play as a role game where you're sort of like pretending and convincing and cajoling. But so for those games, they all went on Kickstarter. They all funded. I don't think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but in retail and afterwards, none of them sort of grew to the success of the Good Cop, Bad Cop franchise, right? Or how would you describe all that?
True. Yeah. I mean, they all really did pretty well. They did fine. And that's either like, in our market, making a little bit of money or breaking even, maybe even losing a little bit of money. I mean, that's, we haven't had a huge success. Good Cop, Bad Cop has been just fantastic, but, everything else has just kind of been like, yeah, we'll make a little bit of money maybe. And we're good with that. I mean, we love designing and publishing and just kind of trying out new things and strategies with the company. So it's just kind of fun for us to do that. But yeah, none of them have been super successful. But it's kind of the game we like making and talking about, and we have more passion for like a social deduction game. Yeah. So that's what we wanna make.
I mean, this is still a part-time thing for you, right? So it being something you enjoy is probably important.
It is, definitely. Yeah. But, we look at it as a hobby business too, and I think that's good for kind of your, viewers to know that, we've been pretty successful when you look at, other companies, but it's still something, especially living in California, and we look at it as a hobby business. We don't want to risk our, kind of livelihood on something that is it's really kind of tough to really make it in this industry.
Yeah. Especially it is tough, and it's particularly tough if you live in an area or region that's significantly more expensive, right? If your living expenses are 2 or 3x somebody in Minnesota or Indiana or Ohio, it makes it very difficult to have the margins and the hit-driven business to take the dive on your own. Certainly some people have done it, but then you start doing, so that was pretty, not predictable isn't the right way to say it, but like you had a pretty much a social deduction plan. You're trying out some different things, and then there are you do a number of different things that were bold and interesting and compelling, and with different results, right? And so I just want to talk to these because these are, I think, we now have a lot of what I would consider, I don't know what I'd consider, like, I want to say mid-tier, but it's not mid-tier. We now have like a huge wealth of 2 to 3 Kickstarter independent board game companies, right? Like a lot of people who have done more than one Kickstarter, but they're still doing Kickstarters and they haven't really expanded. And all of those people are sort of going through the should I do a new game? Should I do an expansion? Should I do an IP? Like, how am I going to go about this? And so there are like super interesting stuff. So, and if I get these out of order, I apologize, but they're all unique. So one was Leaders of Euphoria. So this is an extension of Good Cop, Bad Cop. It has different dynamics and it's brought into the Euphoria world. But this is you're leveraging another brand that's Stonemaier Games, Euphoria, and Jamie Stegmaier. So, like, without getting into the 15-minute story, just the 1 minute, you like, how did that come about? And I mean, I believe it was a 80, 90K type campaign, if I remember correctly, maybe more. How did, like, what was the initial story? How did it do? And then how did it do sort of in retail afterwards for you guys? Like, was it a good choice?
Sure. Yeah. It was. I mean, it was really fun working with Jamie. I met him in San Francisco. He came out there when I was living up there by you. So he came out and I knew he was going to be in town. I met up with him and we just kind of talked about games, the business. And he said he liked Good Cop, Bad Cop. And I was thinking, like, we're trying to figure out what to do with Good Cop, Bad Cop. Should we're thinking about maybe licensing it, like, think about, Good Cop, Bad Cop, Batman, or something like that. And so we were kind of excited about that. And then he was like, well, if you could think of a way to put it in the Euphoria universe, and that was kind of his big game at that point, then he said, like, I would be very interested. And so then, after that, Clayton and I started talking and we came up with a game and some ideas of how it could fit in and some options. And we kind of brought those to Jamie and talked about it. And he was like, this sounds awesome. Make the game. I'll publish it. So Jamie was going to publish it under his brand. And so then after a while, maybe 6 months or so, we were kind of refining the game. And then he was like, you know what? We're not a social deduction company. I don't think this fits with what we do. And so then, he said, so, like, I don't think we want to publish it, but it's a great game. You guys can, like, you can just do it. So then we kind of restructured our contract to be, we're the publisher, and so we published it and just licensed his brand, and he gets royalties on copies that sell. So the campaign, it was about 80,000, 2,000 backers. So it was successful. Like, it looks successful. But it's very expensive to make. There were giant ray guns,
absurdly large.
And so it was pretty expensive to make as well. And it sold. I guess it's probably our second best-selling game in retail too. It did pretty well. I think maybe 8,000 copies or so in retail after that. Yeah. So. I mean, it was good, but then when you look at it, and I've looked at the numbers and everything after all is said and done, but then it actually did kind of, we don't really sell many anymore. Like, each month, we will maybe sell 10 now per month. So it's pretty much died off. And when you look at the numbers, we've basically broken even on it. When all is said and done and all expenses that went towards that game are put into it. You sell 10,000 copies of a game, you think you're going to make money. And part of that is on me for the pricing that I decided on for the campaign and for, after the campaign. And it's on me to make money if that's something that's very important to me, but it's not as important. I just want to, make games and get them out there. So breaking even for me is successful.
And there's a couple of just notes I'd add there. One, I remember talking to Jamie at some point along the way, and him, that version of the story where it was sort of loves the game, but was very focused at the time on defining what Stonemaier games were, and he was very much in that Stonemaier brand building, and struggling with this feels not off the IP brand, it feels on the IP brand, but a little off the Stonemaier brand. So it sounds like you guys came to a good solution there. The other thing I'll note on the IP side is you run into these challenges where, not unfortunately, but basically in a way, Jamie stepped away from Euphoria. Not because he didn't like it, but he ends up doing Scythe, he ends up doing Charterstone, and so it's not like an IP when you take on Batman, like your suggestion. Batman's a perennial IP that keeps hitting and keeps bringing awareness. Euphoria, by the time you guys probably were released, was sort of an older game that, and so, that sort of affects your long-term value on the IP, though presumably because he likes to make things and go back to old stuff. If he ends up doing some more further Euphoria work, then you guys might be in a position to sort of leverage and be like, hey, remember this other game too on that brand.
Yeah.
But so okay, so that was your experience leveraging this board game designer IP, right? And so so then I think after that was Barker's Row, right?
After Leaders was it Barker's Row right after? Yeah, I guess it was. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so Barker's Row. So that was your sort of social deduction with IP. Now Barker's Row, you know, is a great game, gorgeous, like AAA execution. I've reviewed it, you know, just outstanding. But it's just a board game, like in a very pretty,
True.
Wonderful, fun way. But I mean, it's Steve Armini design and really neat concept, and being in a Barker's Row and having all this people in the stands and stuff. But you know, how would you even? It's like
it's a card game. It's
communal tableau card ability game or something like that, right?
Yep, a little trick-taking kind of feel to it.
Yeah. And so what for you guys, were you like, you loved the game? Was it about experimenting? What did you think about that play for you guys?
Yeah, we were thinking, so we had a feeling that social deduction kind of had a little bit of a bad name. It was getting a little bit of a bad name, or at least some people would say like, oh, it's just another social deduction game. And they're pretty easy to make, really. I mean, when you have a secret, like that brings out like some feelings in people as they play, like, ooh, I have a secret that you don't know about. And that like right away is fun. And so it's easy to just kind of make a simple game that's pretty fun if you're doing social deduction.
Yeah, there was a time when they were exploding, absolutely exploding.
Yeah, and so it was around that time that we were like, there are so many of these, we probably shouldn't just stick to being a social deduction company. We should kind of broaden that a little bit. And we kind of tiptoed away from it a little bit with Exposed, and then Barker's Row is completely no hidden identity, no social deduction. And so we just played it, and it was a card game, when Steven brought it to us. And then when we played it, we were like, this is really fun. We also wanted to try to get into meeples. We wanted to do something with meeples. We really like them in some games. We thought we could do more with them. We could make them cooler. Like all meeples, at least then, were pretty simple.
Those meeples are pretty spectacular, sir.
Yeah, they are pretty sweet. And maybe you even influenced me a little bit with Liftoff, because I saw your really cool meeples. So maybe subconsciously that was probably in there too a little bit. But so we wanted to do something with meeples. He brought us this carnival game, and we were thinking, he had little cubes. It was cards and then some little cubes for the people. And so we were like, man, we could make these all little people that you get to put, in your stands when you play an attraction. And then we were like, and then we could put them on like 3D like risers, like grandstands. And so then it's
incredible, man. You executed it.
So we fell in love with the idea of what we could do with that game. And so we took a card game, and when you look at Barker's Row, it's a card game. But then we just kind of overproduced it. And we overproduced Leaders of Euphoria too, because it's just, I don't know, I guess it's kind of becoming a little bit.
So where was when somebody uses the term overproduced, it's a pejorative, right? The suggestion there is that perhaps you maybe didn't quite entirely learn the lesson from Leaders of Euphoria, and so you've made this really high quality game, and then perhaps, if I follow the story, maybe it turned into too high of a price point for the type of game. I mean, how did it do in market? I mean, so the production's incredible. You did overproduce it, but it doesn't feel overproduced. Like, it feels over the top, but it doesn't. I've played games where I'm just like, this is ridiculous. Like, it's hindering. Your game is just oozing themes, so it other than fitting it back in the box was a little annoying. Like, other than that, like, it didn't bother me. How did it do after Kickstarter?
It did, and it's not. It only came out. How long has it been? 3 months ago in stores. So we're still doing. We're still selling, quite a few copies. how many has it been so far? Maybe 2,000 or so after Kickstarter. So it's done pretty well. We haven't sold out completely, but we're close. So I feel like it's good. We've made money on the game too overall. But again, like at this point, I think we've made just under $10,000, like when you put all expenses into it. So again, just to give people an idea of like how much money you can make. And it was a successful game. It did well on Kickstarter. It's doing well in retail. It's in Barnes and Noble test stores. So it's doing pretty well, and we'll see. It hasn't slowed down in stock yet, and so I think we're thinking about an expansion for it. We'll see how it keeps selling and seeing if that makes sense.
And just as a like for people who are think about board games and huge numbers, from my perspective, right, when I look at my product lines and the games I've done a number of them, like 10,000 is a massive success to me. Like that's a huge success. Then you're in the, if you do a small Kickstarter, you might only be bringing 1,000 to retail, 2,000 to retail. Maybe you brought in 4 or 5. But, I just think people need to understand just generally, like when you have a Kickstarter that had 700 copies sold, 1,000 copies sold, it's not like you sell 1,000 on Kickstarter and then sell 30,000 retail, right? That's basically the scale. And the reality is, if you're smart about it, you can make $10,000, $20,000, $30,000. If you're not smart about it, you can lose $10,000. But it's few and far between the people who are walking away and saying, "Oh yeah, I've sold 50,000, 60,000, 70,000 copies at retail." I mean, even people who are doing really successful, huge success in my book are still in that 20, 30, 40, 50,000. Like a 50,000 copy hobby board game is like amazing sales. Now, Yellow might look at that and be like, I mean, I don't know their numbers, but I think for the, so I think there's a scale that people don't realize where it's like, oh yeah, it was 4,000 or 3,000. That's a pretty big number in retail these days.
And also, I wouldn't want someone who has had like 1 or 2 Kickstarters to think that they're going to sell, or 0, and they're doing their first Kickstarter, that you're just going to go after the Kickstarter and sell 2,000 copies. 2,000 copies is good. It's really good after the Kickstarter campaign to sell that in stores. And we've been doing this for probably 5 years now, building our distribution network and building partnerships with retailers and building a brand that people recognize. And so all these things lead to more sales after the Kickstarter campaign. And if you're just starting out, you don't have that, and you're not going to sell that many.
Yeah, and I want to stick to the games because I have a couple more to go, but that I'm curious about. But you're now with PSI about a year or 2 ago you switched over, and PSI is another sort of consolidator like Impressions. Though Impressions recently, James Matthew was the first person I saw announce that they're getting acquired by Flat Horse or Flat River Horse Group. I forget the name of it.
What?
So that's changing. I think it's officially happening at the end of the year or something. But as somebody who works with Impressions, it's going to impact me. Okay, so you do this board game IP. You do this not social deduction game. Then you have your Total Recall campaign. This is a classic IP, and you were doing social deduction, right, in terms of the gameplay.
Yeah.
But I don't remember the exact numbers, but it fizzled to a degree. I mean, ultimately, you canceled the campaign. Like, again, not, just on, in the sort of 3-minute scale, sort of what was the thought? What happened? What's your reflection on all that?
Yeah. So we did the Euphoria IP. So we tried using an intellectual property, licensing it, and producing our own game based on it. And it did well with Leaders of Euphoria. We were very happy with that. And so then we did Valiant card game 2. So in the Valiant comic universe, and Total Recall. We were basically like, I think this is the way to go. I think we should just get some IPs. They already have a built-in audience. and build a game around them. And then like that should be the future of Overworld games. So we signed a few license deals. One was Total Recall, one was Valiant, and we've got another one too in the works as well. But with Total Recall, there were some things that did make it fizzle. We let it actually go and go through the 20, 30 days of the campaign, and we didn't fund. And the whole time we were kind of thinking like we could fund, we could just pour more money into marketing and just like try to get it through, but that just didn't make sense from a business perspective. So what went wrong? It was a bunch of little things. When you sign a licensed game or when you sign an IP, you commit to a few dates. So you commit to a date when you're going to market, a marketing date, when you're going to start announcing the game and marketing it. If it's a Kickstarter campaign, you're going to say, this is when I'm going to launch on Kickstarter by this date at the latest. You say, I'm going to be in stores by this date at the latest. So you sign these dates. And then as you know that there are so many things that kind of happen, over the course of a year or two that you don't expect, and things take longer. Manufacturing takes longer. Shipping makes longer. You didn't make Chinese New Year. Sure. Now you got to delay a month. There's a whole bunch of things that come up, and it's really hard to stick to those dates. And so when you have those, you have to kind of cut some corners. And when things don't go well, you kind of, so like, our art for this game took a very long time, very, very long time. And then at the end, it was like, okay, we got to make it by this date. And then, the illustrator is trying to kind of hurry up and finish. And, we didn't have time to kind of make changes and correct them. And we had to get it approved by the licensor and all these things. And like, okay, we got to launch. And so then we launched. And there were some things that, we didn't get a whole lot of support for the, kind of from the brand until it was kind of too late. Like we missed the first part of the first day of the campaign. And then overall, like we were kind of had a whole bunch of things in our pipeline, and we just kind of rushed it. We didn't do as much to like build up anticipation beforehand like you should, and getting people, kind of on board to help us kind of create the game and showing art, that kind of thing. So it was all just kind of overall just kind of rushed, and it's hard to, it felt like it was okay, then. But then now looking back on it, I was like, we should have just restructured our contract, taken time to just make sure that the art was perfect for the game. And we should have just kind of slowed things down. But, when you're in the middle of it, and, we got a little cocky too. We had like 8 successful campaigns before that one. And it's just like, we'll fund, it'll be all right, and let's just do it. And it didn't happen.
Yeah, it's a challenge, and I certainly have seen creators sort of get, not to again put words in your mouth, but a little complacent, right, in terms of all the prep and the things that are involved. And I having done a lot of campaigns myself, I've been punched in the face in a campaign, right? I mean, Gem-Pack Cards, I had a goal of 10K and I made like 12, right, or 11, and I didn't make it until like the last. I mean, like, so like. I was reminded early on. It's like, oh, you can miss, and so it's tough. And also, I mean, it's a little old now, but with Vincent from Lucky Duck Games, who does a ton of IP stuff, all of those conditions in the contracts, all of those dates, the relationship with the partner, what they're going to do for you, how it's all going to time out, makes it very challenging, and especially when you're first jumping in. That leads to Ninja. That you brought up. I also happen to notice that you've so kindly put Herbaceous and Sunset Over Water behind you. Thank you. I'm sure those aren't there every day. But so this one, you had signed it around the same time, but you're like, you know what? We're just going to go straight to retail. And was that in reaction to Total Recall, or was it sort of you planned from the beginning that way?
That was a request from the licensor. When we were talking to them, we were like, we want to do a Kickstarter campaign. Trust us. This is going to be, and this was before Total Recall, but trust us. This is the way to do it. This is the way to be successful. We want to put your brand out there. And I guess they had something they had reasons why they didn't want to use Kickstarter. They were somehow affected by a Kickstarter campaign in the past, and they just kind of wanted to stay away from it. And so they said, no, we don't want to do Kickstarter. We want you to make this game, but we don't want you to do Kickstarter. And that could have been a point where I was like, we only do Kickstarter campaigns, so this probably isn't a good partnership. Probably doesn't make sense. But Clayton and I talked about it, and we were like, this sounds like a cool experiment. Let's just try and see if we can make this successful outside without using Kickstarter. Not like we're going to just leave Kickstarter completely, but more of a just like, let's just give it a try, And so we did it. And we figured there was enough of a cult following with the Valiant comic universe that, in stores, we could get this into comic stores, and it would do really well outside of Kickstarter. So we wanted to give it a try with that one. And that's only been out for about 3 months or so as well, too. So we don't have all the data on that one, but I mean, it's pretty clear that we missed an opportunity without using Kickstarter to get it in front of a bunch of people. So
right, there's a certain amount of marketing you miss out of, and awareness you miss out of, that if you're not able to do the traditional, marketing after, Kickstarter marketing in a way is really condensed and refined, and there's all these pipelines that are if you do Kickstarter, you get used to what the Kickstarter marketing pipelines are, and there's opportunities outside of them, but the sort of guy at a comic book marketing pipelines are totally different, scaled and priced out differently, and are challenging. So, so right now, but did you, you don't have to go into any of the specifics, but did you basically have to take the upfront risk, or when they told you from a manufacturing cost and, design perspective or development cost perspective, or did they give you a little lenience because they were asking you not to use Kickstarter?
No, we took the risk. We took the financial risk. Yep. And, I mean, it's one of the things that is great about not, keeping this as a hobby business, at least right now, we can take these risks, and if things don't go well, it's not, it's not the end of the world, right. So we can keep moving on. So it was fine. I mean, and also the success of Good Cop, Bad Cop has given us this financial foundation of money
Sure.
coming in all the time, still, that we can use that to try these experiments too. So yeah, we took the risk up front, and it's okay. And we'll see. We still haven't made money on this game yet, but I think it is one of those kind of cult following games. I think there's this this really loyal fan base to the Valiant comic universe, and we made this game for them. It's not a really heavy game that's really hard to get into. Very easy, simple, easy to get into, easy to play. So it's what a Valiant comic book fan wants from a game like this. But you get a Eurogamer to play this game, and they won't have fun because it is probably too easy for them, too simple for them. Not easy as far as difficulty, but just kind of.
No, I get it. I mean, you could say the same thing about Good Cop, Bad Cop, right?
True.
So to close it out, we've gone on this board game journey. And now, if I'm not mistaken, and please correct me, but you're heading back to Kickstarter with one of your earlier IPs, New Salem, which is gorgeous as well, by the way. And you're doing an expansion and a new standalone. Can you talk about that game briefly?
Yeah, so New Salem was our second game that we ever made. So it's been out for 3-4 years now, and it sold out a while ago. So it definitely did well, but we didn't have enough confidence to do another print run when it sold out. We just weren't sure. But there's also a loyal following for that game that has been asking us for an expansion, and and it's our favorite game that we have ever designed. It's for Clayton and I. It's the one we would like to play more than anything because it has more meat than Good Cop, Bad Cop. It's got a little bit higher learning curve than Good Cop, Bad Cop. So I wouldn't bring this out with someone who is super casual, well, at least new to gaming. But it's got drafting, simultaneous play. You're never waiting for your turn. Supports up to 8 people, 3 to 8 players, and scales really well. So it's just you're always playing, and we feel it kind of embodies the Salem witch trial, the Salem witch hunt, like what they felt back then. We tried to put that into the game, so we're really excited about the game itself. And it's one of those that we could put our time and resources into something like a new game that maybe will be more successful. But we have more passion. After Total Recall, we were like, let's just make what we want to make. And we want to make more for New Salem. We want to make more for this universe, even if it doesn't mean we're going to make a bunch of money on it. Like, this is what we want to do. And so we're kind of getting back to our roots. And so that's why we're doing this. So it's a second edition. So we get to see what people have.
It's a
second edition and expansion. So it's a second edition with the expansion in it. So it's a new expansion. So we're gonna, like, on Kickstarter, you're gonna be able to upgrade. You're gonna get an upgrade. You can get an upgrade kit for your first edition to make it into second edition. But then when you buy it, in a store, you're gonna buy second edition, and that's gonna have the expansion in it. So. So it's we're excited about this one, and it's getting back to our roots, and
awesome.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's fun. I've for a long time been meaning, and sort of it's on a slow pace, but get Liftoff. I made my own sort of overproduction mistakes on that one to a degree, but it's one of the games I hear about from people the most, and people ask me about the most. But like, there weren't that many. You look at these games and you're like, oh, there was only 2,000 Liftoff ever printed, right? There was only 1,000 in stores, or like whatever I printed. I mean, maybe it was 2,500. But there's that. It basically doesn't exist. Like, that's such a small number of games for such a small number of people. But people still ask about it, and so I'm working on a similar thing. Not anytime soon, but we, updated it, expansion stuff, upgrade kit. It's a little bit of a mess when you try to figure it all out, but we'll get there.
It is, yeah. It's tough to make a game that is going to be still support like the people who were on board with your game in first edition, but then also create what you want to create, and kind of you have so much time to think about how you wish you would have done it, before and you want to bring out that new thing. And still support this other group, and then this group that bought the game trays, as part of our campaign. And now we got to fit a first edition box with no game tray, first edition box with the game tray, second edition box with the game tray. Like, everything's got to work for everybody, and it is very difficult to do.
Yeah, for sure. Well, it has been an awesome chat, super fascinating stuff. I commend you on being, breaking into like the. I don't know, the 8+ crew or 7+. Where you at? What campaign will New Salem?
This will be the 10th campaign.
Yeah, you are going to go into double-digit campaign.
I know,
it's exciting. It's a select group of stalwart individuals.
Have you been there? Have you broken through yet?
Sort of. No, I don't think technically. I did a Gaming with Edo campaign. And I ran a Heroes Welcome campaign as a collaborator, and I ran the whole thing, but it wasn't pencil first, so I'm technically, I would say not quite there yet, but I think if you look at my name, it might say it. But no, getting there. Okay. Cool. It's quite the endurance race. But nevertheless, thank you so much for being on, and again, this is also on the Board Game Business Podcast at some similar point, so thank you for having me on as well. And thank you for people watching and listening and all that good stuff.
Yeah, thanks for everything you do for the community, for creators and everything. These videos are amazing.
Absolutely. Talk to you later.
Yep.
Bye.
Bye.
Hey everybody, Edo here, and thanks for watching Gaming with Edo. Reviews over here on this playlist, League and Insider videos over here on this one. Subscribe, share, all that good stuff. But most importantly, play some great games. Thanks.